This is Keyed In with Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. And now, here are your hosts, Max Rabin and Brent Jackson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Keyed In podcast. I'm your host, Max Rabin.
And I'm Brent Jackson.
Brent, today we have a great friend of ours on the show. This is Trish Yan. Trish is the embodiment of the American dream, self-made success story. Trish immigrated to the United States from the Philippines at a young age, and she is a executive coach. And she started her career she's transitioned from real estate to this, so that's our tie-in with our real estate here. But Trish, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Welcome to the show, our
Thank
dear
you.
friend Trish.
So tell us from the beginning, you're big into story and how your whole life has shaped where you've gotten to, and tell us a little bit about like where you're from and coming to the United States and your background a little bit.
So we moved here. I was born in the Philippines and moved here in 1985. So I was 11, and 3 days later I turned 12, because back in the day, before 12, your airfare was half off. So of course my parents were like, let's go before you're 12.
Wow.
So grew up here, essentially, middle school, high school, and then went back to the Philippines when I was 24 for my visa. And
So you came to D.C.
Came to Maryland, so suburban Maryland.
Okay.
And, grew up in the Philippines. And so this is a funny story. So when my mom said, we're moving to the States, I was thinking, okay. And she said, we're moving into a townhouse. And I said, well, what's a townhouse?
Sounds so exotic.
We lived in the Philippines in what we call a village, but it's not really a village. It's a gated community. And, life was a little bit different there. We each had our nannies. We had maids and drivers. And so she says, we're moving into a townhouse. And so I have 4 sisters. So after a 27-hour flight, we pull into this cul-de-sac in Rockville, Maryland, and there's 5 houses, 5 houses, and 5 houses. So I say, which one's mine?
Right.
She said, oh, we just have the one on the end. And we started from scratch. There were mattresses on the floor, Salvation Army TV. Like, we literally left everything. Came with 10 suitcases, and we just had the townhouse on the end. I opened the door to the powder room, which I thought led to the other houses. No, it was just the powder room.
What was maybe I know this, I'm not sure. What was the impetus for the move? I mean, if you're coming from like what sounds like this nice community in Philippines to a Rockville townhouse, which is nice too.
Yeah.
What brought you guys here?
Well, there was political unrest,
okay.
And my great uncle was the former vice president of the Philippines, and so they attempted to assassinate him. And so at the same time, my mom thought, let's just have our kids, let's move to the States and let's just have them study in the States, because my mom was educated in the States.
Right on.
So it all just kind of worked out. But we had to leave everything and come back here.
Going a little deeper, though, like why Rockville versus New York City, Florida, West Virginia?
Because that's where you're from, Brent?
Yes.
Yes. The promo.
I think she found a job with her classmate in Rockville. So she was a speech pathologist. So she got a job sponsorship there. Then we were able to stay. And so that's how that happened. And then a year later, my great uncle became ambassador to the U.S. from the Philippines when Cory Aquino became president.
Okay. Where are you in the pecking order as far as your sisters?
I'm the third, the forgotten middle child.
Jan Brady here.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've been in this area pretty much since you moved to the United States then?
Yeah.
Where did you go to college?
So I went to University of Maryland, College Park, and worked at Sequoia right on the Georgetown waterfront in my college days.
Very homegrown stuff here.
Yeah, so I've been around for a long, long time.
So how did you get started first in real estate?
So I was a single mom. I came back to this country in 2000, gave birth, and my mom died 4 weeks before I gave birth. And so an old friend of mine in college said, do you want to be an assistant or just get into real estate? So I started at the Bethesda Gateway office, the Long and Foster Bethesda Gateway. And I lasted there for a minute, and then was introduced to Nancy Taylor Bubis, and I worked for her for 7 years. And that was really my impetus or
Right.
my start into the real estate
Nancy
career.
Taylor, one of the like top selling agents in the history of DC.
Yeah.
Right.
She's up there in the country too.
Yeah,
She's,
of course. Yes. And so what were some of the things that you were doing with Nancy? Like, I believe you told me before that there was a level of disorganization. You helped them like sort of build a team at that
Well,
time.
it was just the two of us
Okay.
in the beginning. And so my first day on the job with her was at the hair salon. So
Okay.
she was just handing me papers and I had no idea what I was doing. And so intuitively, I just started creating systems and processes and started marketing and advertising. And I started with her in April of 2002. And so I remember the summer of 2005, our manager at the time came into our office, Tom Bryan, and said, "Do you guys know that the two of you have sold $75 million?" Had no idea. So that year we broke 100 million, just the two of us in 2005.
Yeah.
And
Major.
that's kind of how it all started. And then her team started to grow, and
Right.
it was really, really a fun time.
That's a lot of real estate for two people. 17 years ago? That's a lot.
It's huge.
A lot. It was maybe average price point was about 800,000. And so we would also do, both sides of the deal. And we didn't have MLS, we didn't have Blackberries or, Macs,
Right. Yeah,
remember
you're totally,
how
totally.
it was back in
Mhm.
the day? I mean, we had to make our own brochures. We had to take our own photos. I mean, it was just like, we had to go to people's houses to have them sign the contracts. It was a different world.
That's 20. That's like hardcore. That's 24/7. Like, what's the term I'm looking for? Just like indoctrination by fire. I mean, that's a lot of business. You know what I mean?
And I'd bring my son to the office on a Friday night at 10:30
Yeah, you
to
gotta
write
do
a
it all.
contract and say, "It's okay, we'll get you a toy tomorrow."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, different world.
So, from there, though, you kind of you shifted into management. You went from working with Nancy and helping her build her team, and she made a transition to a different brokerage. And then you are now with TTR Sotheby's, but you were more in a management role. Why did you shift from, you had all these agent duties. You're clearly good at being upfront with the clients and the personalities, and the lay of the land. Why the shift to management at that time in your career?
I just still felt like I needed a full-time job because
Mhm.
at that point, it was 2008, so my son was only 7, and I was too afraid to go out on my own and sell. And so this fear-based mentality, for what it was worth, it was a blessing because then I called Michael Rankin. I created this job at TTR for myself. And so it took about 9 months to create this position because I said I needed a full-time job. He didn't have any openings at the time, so we just curated something.
Right.
And so it kind of worked. And so it took about 9 months. And then, so I joined TTR in 2009 as the director of business development.
Right.
And then that's when I got into management and then started coaching and consulting.
Yep.
So with Michael Rankin, like how did that relationship start? Doing deals with Nancy Taylor? Or
He had only done a couple of deals at that point. I remember one on Dent Place, and he'd only had a couple. Alex and Paul had done more with us at that point. And so I didn't know him that well, but I just, one of my friends introduced us and said, "Hey, you need to chat with her." And so we had these like covert secret meetings at his house because I remember I was a WFP and Thursday afternoons were tour day. And so I would sneak over to Michael Rankin's house on Thursday afternoons and we would have, our interviews and our meetings. And then Friday afternoons when he was driving to the farm, we would then start also creating our strategy.
Yeah, I mean, like this is super inside baseball, but for like our broader listeners, this is a small world that we live in sometimes, right? So if you're looking to shift teams or do new different things in the business, go to a different brokerage or change roles and with these folks, like everyone seems to run into each other every day.
Oh yeah.
So it is very tricky to
So you
keep
have
that.
to hide.
Yeah.
Like I
Yes.
literally had to hide, and then he would. I mean, we was like we were secretly dating or something, but we weren't, obviously, because I was trying to find a job.
Right.
So so I worked under Michael's team for a couple years until Mark Loam joined us, and then I started working under Mark, and that became my role elevated and just became more defined.
So this role as business development for a pretty sizable brokerage. Tell us about some of things that you were handling? And so you were coaching new talent or helping the folks that were already there. Tell us some of these roles that came with the job.
Well, when I first started, the company was only 2 offices, and we only had 70 agents, and we were selling about 450 million. So now last year we closed at 5 billion with 10 offices, and so we've grown significantly. And so in the beginning it was just kind of mishmash. You did whatever we could do. We didn't have a marketing department. We didn't have, I remember Dave DeSantis was doing the co-op ads, I was doing the marketing, I did the magazine, started integrating events into the business model, and then did a lot of community outreach.
Yep.
And so coincidentally, when Mark joined us, he was big in the community and a big philanthropist. So we just put our heads together, and that's how it just all started to grow.
Gotcha. So with regards to this role, you've talked about some of your some of the definition of what you were doing. What are some of the challenges that came along with being in the business development side for the brokerage? I mean, obviously you had to get some of these different processes in place and build this, but tell us about some of the challenges in dealing with that kind of stuff.
I think it was new for me because the company had been working in a different market. And so the agents that I started working with were working in different markets and different price points. And so that was really interesting for me. And my challenge was, how do I help these agents build their businesses? Because that was my agreement with Michael and my job description as to how do I help these agents. And so having no market share, like coming from my previous job, we didn't have any market share. We didn't have any stories to tell. We had to be really creative. And so I learned that skill of, kind of figuring out what storylines we could share. And so then in that sense, we started to build more market, and we started to, expand a little bit more. So we were small, so we didn't have much, but we got through it.
Do you mean storytelling in terms of like where the brokerage is heading? It was also the agents too?
Both. So
Okay.
more for the brokerage, right?
Gotcha.
We didn't have much data to share. We didn't have a lot of statistics yet,
Right.
But we were climbing up the ladder. And so it was really an interesting time to be able to figure out, okay, what aspect or what angle do we use? And so that we use the community outreach angle as well, because that's just what happens in Washington, and that's how people work, and that's how people function. And so being really involved in the community was a huge stepping stone for us, and I think that totally elevated our exposure.
I totally agree. I think even because we've gone through your coaching going way back when, I think that was one of the first things you told us was find your passion, tell the story, but get involved with the community. And I think, how old is Finn? Is probably like 8 years ago, we started getting really involved, like with the local school level, and then whatever else we're passionate about outside of the schools. But following your lead, and I saw the firm do that as well. And I think that might have been before Mark even came through.
Yeah.
Because I did that a lot with Nancy, and so I just transferred it over here, and it just makes sense for our area and for you guys as realtors to get involved, in the areas that you live and work. Right. So not just to be seen as that token real estate agent, and sometimes people run away from you at the grocery store, but if you get involved in the community and you give back, then they see you in a different light. And so it's a lot softer.
Yes. Our name is everywhere, like in Capitol Corridor, Navy Yard, Capitol Hill, and other jurisdictions or other neighborhoods as well. But bus signs, bike share ads, magazines, flyers, whatever the blow your nose at the grocery store thing is. I know
Nice.
the firm doesn't appreciate all of those.
No,
but,
we don't like those.
So, but we're everywhere. So it is a softer approach. So when you go into the listing presentation, it's like, oh, I've been seeing you guys for like years, but have they really?
Yeah, but it's layers of impressions,
Right.
right? So it's layer upon layer. And then when you want to get a group of your clients together, you can host something in the summertime, get an ice cream truck, and then say, everybody bring, children's books, and we'll donate it to the local library or something.
Yes.
So every time you host an event with your clients, you have a philanthropic angle attached to it. It's a much easier way to get an audience and for them to remember.
One of our biggest events that we do, it's actually this Saturday, and it was from you. It's the Recycle Day. So this will be it's our 9th or 10th annual Recycle Day. So we have 9 different locations. We do a mail drop, we do email blasts. Today we're putting up signs throughout the neighborhoods on the mailboxes, And kid you not, we'll have 2 large trucks. It'll come through and it's like recycle trash or donate stuff. And people come through and are so appreciative of, thank you so much. You're a godsend. And it's interesting to see like what comes through it in a given year. Like COVID, it's like everybody's getting rid of their desk stuff and whatnot. But it's, giving back to the community goes a long way.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
It's huge. It's a major part of, what we're supposed to be doing in life, but also, yes, in terms of the business community and in DC, the way the social world works here, it's massive. So let's go to our current Trish Yan, who you've now a certified executive coach.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an actual course.
Yes, I went to Georgetown University.
Nice.
So in 2015, it's one of those things where if you keep myself, I've had to pivot a lot. I've had to shift because of whatever life has shown me or whatever situation I was in. So when you start hearing these whispers that what you're doing is just okay and it's not that interesting, so then I started looking into this course at Georgetown University, and so I took this 9-month course for executive leadership coaching.
Right.
And then really took on, created an internal coaching program at TTR, and along with Marcus Jaffe, another coach who's a Mike Ferry certified coach, he and I have coached now year to date over 200 of our agents, and their average year over year growth is about 25 to 30% in volume. And so we don't see that till maybe 6 months to a year later,
Right.
but there's definitely an increase in their production.
So coaching is one of these things, I'm sure it's been around for longer than we realize, but it's become more in the zeitgeist, I guess, so to speak. Personal coaches, motivational speakers. I mean, these are all kinds of things that we're more aware of now that the internet is just all in our face. You see these people on YouTube. We see them everywhere, right? But you already had some experience going into that with your actual role in the company. And so you just decided to take it to another level.
Right. And I wanted to get deeper and kind of take care of the whole person. Because if you can be a business coach or a real estate coach and you're talking about business planning and budgets and lead generation and cold calling, I wanted to go, and that to me was fine. Everybody was asking me, how do I get to be the next Nancy Taylor? And I'm like, well, you can't. So let's figure out how you can be the best you, right? So then that kind of opened my eyes to saying, let's take care of the whole person. And so I have had some clients who come into the first session and they're bawling their eyes out because their marriage is falling apart or whatever it is, right? So we have to deal with what's in their way first, and then and only then can we deal with their business.
So let's break it down then, because I think this would be great for the listeners. So
Am I going to end up in tears here?
Yeah, no, not
I'm going
today.
to start coaching you too.
I'm already nearly in tears as it is right now. But that's another story. So an agent, like, because you're working with mostly agents, but I know you have other types of clients too now at this point, right?
Yes.
But so you're working mostly with agents. So when an agent comes to you, let's say it's a new agent at the company, let's say they're already closing 5 to 10 million a year. They're doing okay, right? To take them to the next level, so you're talking about the first thing you do is you want to get the blockages out of the way,
Right.
so that they have the correct energy level. So tell me, like, if I come to you, I say, Trish, I'm selling about 5 to 6 million a year for the last couple of years. I really would love to bring this to like the 10 to 15 million category, like this year. I've got a good Instagram account. I've been doing some mailers. I pick up open houses for agents. Here's like where I live. What's the first step? Like what in coaching?
So it's do you have your database? Database is always the first one, right? Everybody, but the database is actually your lifeline to your business. And so if you don't have that organized, then that's always the first step. And then we go into goal setting, and then we go into, okay, where are your markets? And depending on their volume, my sweet spot is not a newer agent, but it's more of an agent who's been around for a while, who has had some business. But I like to double, triple, as you know, Brent, I've doubled, tripled.
Yes.
Helped you with your business, right?
Yeah, very much.
And so it is about goal setting, but it is also about mindset, right? It is a lot about coming from a place of abundance as opposed to a place of scarcity. And then I also do a lot of work with them in terms of, centering themselves and figuring out, okay, what makes you tick? Right? What are some of your practices? What are your efficiencies? What are things that you need help with? Is it time blocking? There's certain parts where when you're at a point when you're getting to 15 to 20 million a year and you're in the weeds all the time, it's because you need an assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really kind of every scenario is different and every agent is different. And so I really take that person and I say, okay, well, what are your goals first? How are we going to get there? And then what's realistic? Do you have money stashed away? Because I like to spend a lot of money. And then do you have social media? Do you have this? Do you have that? And I push them. And I push them to do events. I push them to do, dinners and call people. And all these
accountability.
Things. Accountability, yeah.
Huge, yeah.
You always told me, because you've coached us for years, and I think going back, we were doing 15 to 18 million. And then we got our first assistant on, you were pushing us. We went up to 8, and then we went to like 38 million.
Mm-hmm.
Brought on 2 more assistants, went to 60. And, now we're doing a lot more than that. But you always said to get outside your comfort zone, whether it's doing events or having dinner parties with people you don't know, to kind of go one step further and reach.
Right.
So that's always stuck with me, because I'm not a huge social person. When I go and have a dinner party with like 12 of my closest friends, quote unquote, but it's like that's what you have to do to get your business to the next level.
Yeah.
Give us, Brian, give us an example of like one step further in reach. Like what?
So for me, it's going back to sports, right? So for me, it's like taking a friend. It could be a colleague. I've taken Max to the basketball games. I've taken Jonathan. I've taken other agents with other firms. But to me, it's like take the uncomfortable, like, oh, I got to talk with this guy. But I'm in a sports setting, so we can watch some basketball and cheer on the team and have a little bit of a backdrop, so I don't have to do so much talking and whatnot. And the same with our client event, right? So the team hates me, but I always like, all right, well, let's get a suite for like 100 people at a hockey game or a baseball game, because then I'm in my comfort zone as far as sports, so then I can have like a natural conversation, like, oh, did you just see what Strasburg did, or what about those Yankees, or whatever the case may be.
Don't talk about those Yankees with Jonathan around.
But I like how you said that. Like it's like we've been to a few games together, and you just said like, well, we have the backdrop of the game, so we don't need to talk the entire. You talk my ear off the entire time, though. Literally.
Did, yes.
So that makes me clearly the sports makes you more comfortable.
Right.
But so okay, I wanted to ask you a quick question though about like on that personal level, right? So you got the agent or the client who's coming to you for this help to get to wherever they're getting to, and you have, say for example, the person who comes in bawling their eyes out, and they've got a personal issue in front of them that's new to them, or maybe not new, and it's just still going on, and that is a big blockage for them to do anything in their business or their life. So in that specific example, what's the first step you take? This person might need more help than you can provide.
Right. And I supply them with a coaching agreement that says this is not therapy.
Right.
Although it sometimes ends
it's
up
not
being
talk
therapy. Yeah. And I'm not a licensed therapist. So I just kind of dabble. But what I think I do is I'm able to give them a different perspective. And I'm really blunt. And so I ask them really hard questions, and I make them really look at their life and say, okay, what do you really want? Are you telling me you really want to be successful? Or is that just a bunch of crap that you're just trying to hide behind, right? So I'm able to see and call them out. And so whatever the situation may be, I think I'm pretty direct. And so then we can easily shift into, okay, well, what is it that you want? How do you want your business to flow? What do you see yourself doing? What's a little bit outside of your comfort zone? Let's push you a little bit.
So sometimes you have to give people the answers that they may not want to hear,
exactly,
in order to get them to move forward.
Right. I ask them the questions that make them think, because a lot of coaching is me asking them the questions and then letting them stir and stew and say, oh God, is that really how I show up? Well, yeah.
So going back to the original question, or one of the questions, you enjoy working with agents that have been doing this for a while, and either they're trying to get to the next level or they're stagnant for whatever reason. Not, I just got my license and now I need to get some business. That's not your candidate.
I think it's because it's always the same thing, right? If you're for a new agent, there's certain things that you're always going to tell them. They have to hustle. They have to, they have to reach out to their database. It's kind of rote for me. And so if you have some business in your back pocket and you've done it for a few years at least, then that's more interesting for me, because then I can get you to the next level and the next level. And some people like to stay in the same level, but once they've gotten to that level, then they're like, oh, this is better. Can I go higher?
So looking at a different perspective, what about like a high producing agent or team that's maybe they don't think they have any flaws, but trying to get them from X to Y in a volume?
How do I do that?
Or I mean, is that like a candidate as well? That's
Yeah.
just
Sure, because I'm sure there's a lot of drama within the team and there's not a lot of communication. And so what I bring to the table is accountability and transparency. And then I have the team leads really act as leaders and really take control, but then inviting everybody else on the team to participate.
Right.
So it's just a resource from the outside that can see your business from a very objective level that's been in the business also for a long time.
But the rate for group therapy has got to be higher.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's
well, that's
much,
another
much
question,
higher.
right? I mean, we're at the firm, so I guess two questions. One, I don't even know this. Is it free? And then two, let's say that we have somebody at Compass that comes up to us and said, I heard that great podcast with Trish. Like, will she work with us?
I mean, I'm still at TTR full time, but then during COVID, I launched my own company called Tri Advisors. And so
Right.
most of my clients are at in the Sotheby's network. And so I do have clients across the network in Florida and Boston and different cities like that. I only have one Compass agent that I coach because she's married to a Sotheby's agent in Boston. So, yeah, I mean, there's no, I don't know what the rules are, but.
I'm curious about that, though. So is the Compass agent in Boston as well?
Yeah, but she's going to move. I'm trying to recruit her to Sotheby's.
So there's an angle.
There's an
Yeah,
angle.
that's
You know what I mean?
weird.
That's
Like
a short-lived kind of, And so that's short-lived. And that was our first conversation. It's like, so when are you going to Sotheby's? And so, I've been with the brand for 13 years. And so it's like, I'm really loyal to the Sotheby's International Realty brand.
All right. Well, let's say Trish was coaching herself. Okay. So,
God.
right. And you are, you're coming to see yourself now.
Oh God.
And so you've clearly coached yourself quite a ways
Yes.
already, right?
Uh-huh.
You've got your certification for this new position, which gives you the credibility that you need. And you're also working on a book, which we'll talk about in a second. But like, what's the next level for the TRY advisors?
For me?
Yeah.
So funny, Ari and I were talking about it the other day. and
Ari's
so I
my
think
girlfriend for listeners. Okay.
What? You got a
Who?
girlfriend?
Yeah, I found one.
She's
Go
kind
on.
of cute, and yeah. So I think it's more. Coaching is fun, but it's not. I'm only one person, right? And it's so. I think the next step is to really reach a broader audience, and I think the first step is to reach women, single parents especially, and kind of help motivate them and inspire them to be able to get themselves to the next level, whatever that looks like for them. And so Ari and I are creating a whole slew of content that we're going to then create in social media, and then a book, and and so that's still a baby, but we just
That's really great.
gave birth to it
That's
last
amazing.
week. So
That's really great. And like, not to air anyone's laundry, but my girlfriend Ari she's a single mom,
like me.
and it is a tough go in a lot of cases. I would say most.
Yep.
And there was some homework for us to do when we met. I'm very good at back office kinds of things. I'm very uptight about these things. And I said, we need to clean up back office Ari. And I think a lot of people would benefit from those kinds of interactions.
Yeah.
And there's not always someone there to help with that.
No.
And
it's
you've got to
hard.
ask yourself those hard questions. And it's hard to do that.
Right. And then you also have to think, where do I want to be? Right. So when I was sitting on the floor, this is maybe TMI, but like my mom had just died, and I'm sitting on the floor of this 2-bedroom apartment in Gaithersburg, and I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. Right. But I was just saying, Mom, please, can I please have a nanny? Who was I to ask for a nanny? I didn't even have a job. I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. I was on medical assistance from Montgomery County because I didn't have any money to give birth. Right. So I was essentially kind of on welfare. But 2 years later, what happens? I'm living in Georgetown, and I got to live a nanny. See? But all the nannies thought I was a nanny, too.
Yeah. Side note. Right.
Side note, yeah. So you're a very driven, determined individual to go from like that scenario of, on the ground, just to better your situation, right? That's the one common theme we've heard across the board with all agents. that you have to have the drive and the passion to be successful at whatever it is you want to be. And you had a drive and determination that, you know, you were going to make a better situation out of what was for you and your son. It's impressive.
Thanks. Well, it was just, you know, my focus for him and my priority was his education. And so I poured everything into that. And so when you know what your why is, that's really helpful. And so that's also something that I work on with my agents. It's
knowing your why.
What is your why? Because if you don't know what your why is, then you're not really doing this for the right reasons. And so when you recognize your why, your business model becomes authentic. You are authentic to your clients. People come back to you. You get more referrals, and you know why you're doing what you're doing. And so that's just like the magic, you know, the magic pill there.
My gears are turning right now. It's like the day so many days lately, I'm in the car dealing with God knows what.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I doing this again?
Well, I think at a certain level, you do it at such a high level for so long, and then you just forget, why am I doing this? It's like, because you're looking for the next still. And we're both doing it at a very high level, both volume and unit-wise.
Right, and you get used to this lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes you just have to keep up.
Yes.
Because you're now living at a certain level, but you got to go back to the basics and say, why did I get into this again? And what is it about this that I enjoy? And is it a long-term situation? Because you have to keep
Brett and I are both
remembering
just
your
going
why.
we're like,
Yeah. Starting after this, I'm going to be a ball boy for the Wizards.
That's
a good why.
Yes.
That's fun.
I don't know. I just want to like go to tennis tournaments all the time. I don't, you know, that's
You could be a ball boy at
Yeah.
Wimbledon.
Yeah, I'll be- yeah.
Be like Kramer,
Like,
knock out.
that guy looks a
Rafael
little
Nadal.
old to be wearing those shorts.
He's not running too fast,
Yeah.
that guy.
Did he just take out Rafael Nadal?
Yeah. Well, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry. I guess I'll keep selling real estate. That'll work.
So how are you marketing yourself just within the Sotheby's brand? Is it like social media, word of mouth, or do you have flyers?
It's a lot
email blasts?
for my own business. I go to all of those Sotheby's networking events. And so it's word of mouth. And so finally, after like 13 years at the brand, I'm finally comfortable at these networking events, because some of them can be really massive and really uncomfortable, like 2,500 people. But when you start building a network of friends and agents across the country, then they start, you know, recognizing, oh, Trish is a coach.
Right.
Then you should call her. And so there's certain women's groups across Sotheby's that I'm a part of. And then, you know, I coached Amanda Howard in Alabama. And so, you know, I've spoken at Amanda Howard Sotheby's in Alabama and all these different places. And so it just is, it's growing organically, slowly, but, you know.
Which is better.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of doing it. And I have to connect with a client. I can't just take somebody on who I don't connect with. Otherwise, it's not going to work for either of us.
That's right.
Have you ever had to fire a client?
Yes. Because it's just doesn't work.
Right.
Well, especially at the company, right? I'm very strict. Because this is free to the agents. If you reschedule or cancel twice, you're done.
You're done.
And I tell them that up front, because then they're not committed.
But that just comes back to the whole accountability thing,
Right.
which is so much a part of this, right? It's like, if you're not going to be accountable to these simple things like showing up to our meeting, then what does that equal for your business?
Right. So you're not being the CEO of your own business.
Right.
This is how you're going to act, because you're not even showing up to a meeting for yourself to better yourself.
Right.
So,
No,
but
that's a
some
good point.
agents have to come around and they have to be ready for it. I can't force them to come to me.
Right.
And they're not all ready.
Nope, they're not all ready, because then word gets around that I make them cry. So then people don't like to do that in the workplace.
That's your claim to fame, is you make people cry.
Yeah, exactly.
And you work, you're, I don't know, I'm sure you meet people all over the place, but the office you work in Georgetown is all glass around it. So
Yeah.
I guess people walk by and they just see people crying in there. It's like the crying chamber. I don't know.
Oh yeah,
I'm
but
picturing this.
I have a box of tissue. I have chocolates. I have water.
It's
You
all
know,
the comforts.
yeah.
We need to get you a black box, like a curtain
Yeah.
around the whole
Yes.
thing.
The shade just goes up.
Yeah.
zzz,
Right.
when they start
There
to
goes
cry.
Brett.
Yeah.
All the curtains go around,
Yeah,
come out
he's
in
crying
tears.
his eyes
Got a
out.
rose.
Blowing
I'm
his
like, oh,
nose.
man.
A rose.
Okay, so we mentioned you're working on a book. You're writing a book.
Yeah,
That's ambitious.
that is.
So
Well, it's for years. Everybody's
Yeah.
been telling me, you have to write a book, you have to write a book, you have to share your story.
right.
And so I was introduced to this program at Georgetown. Again, there's this professor who he created this program because his students, he was recognizing that his students weren't finding jobs after graduation. And so when they showed up for the first class, he said, take all your books away because class is going to be different. You're going to write a book. So next thing you know, they're all on their phones, like texting people. And so he was like, oh my God, the next class, nobody's going to show up. Well, when he showed up for the next class, it was like double the size.
Wow.
So people were super excited. And then he finally opened it up to people like us. And so I've started this last summer, and it's a Creators Institute at Georgetown University. And hopefully I'll finish it by the end of the year. And it's about the art of shifting.
Yeah.
Because I've had to shift my whole life. So.
Just curious the process. I mean, so are you writing the book? Do you have a ghostwriter or someone that's proofing it and like?
Yeah. How does it work?
So I'm writing it. We have to write it, and then while you're writing, they tell you to just write. And so then you have a developmental editor that works alongside you and kind of cleans it up a little bit. Then you have to have a 25,000 word manuscript that you turn in order to go to the next level. Then you go into your campaign level, which I did. And then surprisingly, my campaign doubled, which I was like, yikes.
Yeah, now
That's
I really
really-
believe it.
yeah, I was like, oh
Yeah.
God, now it really has to be good. But I already changed the content and the idea of the book from the first campaign. And so now I have a different editor that I'm working with, but we have to do all the writing. So mine's a nonfiction. So it involves my story, a lot of women's stories, and some of other people.
Well, that's an interesting idea too. You mentioned it's nonfiction, but you're talking about, your own personal stories. You obviously talk to a lot of people with a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm.
That usually transition into fiction writing, if you like the process.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
It's
There
not
could
easy.
be another book. Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll just try and get this one done first, and then see what happens.
That's really amazing.
Thanks.
So if you had to go back, one more question for me, all the way back to the beginning, is there any advice you would give yourself? Like, you're looking back, you're a coach. What would you give advice to yourself, from in 2000?
Like 20 years ago?
20 years ago.
Good Lord. I hadn't even worked in an office by then. I was a waitress. And so my mom said, I read her Bible after she died, and there was a page in her Bible, and she says, her 3 blessings and her 3 problems. I was her number 1 problem. Trisha's lack of direction in life. Because
Wow.
she thought I was just going to be a waitress. So looking back, I would just say trust that everything's going to work out. Because I didn't know how I was even going to. I thought I was going to give birth in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there, when you give birth, you have to pay cash. And so I was like, oh my God, imagine I'm alone. I have to get a bag of cash to go give birth. So you just have to trust that whatever is aligned for you is going to happen. But you also have to be open to whatever happens to you.
All right.
That every negative is not necessarily a negative, but it's also a teaching moment. So if you take the teaching moments, then you can further evolve and keep growing.
Well, Trish, we really thank you for coming on today and sharing all your insights with us. The coaching stuff is awesome. Obviously, it's been huge for our industry, and we just wish you all the best with all of the ventures you're doing. The book sounds incredible. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Very grateful on our side as well, because you've helped Rob and myself for the last 10 or 15 years. You've helped us get from X to Y, and we're leaders in the community.
There you go.
Amen.
So now Brent's going to do some rapid fire questions.
Rapid 5. I know you like to read. What's your favorite book that you would recommend to our listeners?
Well, right now I'm reading Breath by James Nestor, and it's a really interesting. It's interesting his approach to breath. It's because breath is everything, right? Especially in my coaching, I always say you've got to breathe because you can never live on an exhale.
After they're done crying, it's time to breathe.
Right.
Right.
So
Interesting.
if you keep living on an exhale, eventually you will die.
Right.
So you need to breathe. So it's kind of
Interesting.
fortuitous that's kind of the book that I'm reading now.
Do you have a favorite TV show?
Not really, but right now we're watching Outlander.
Outlander. Favorite vacation spot?
Bermuda.
Bermuda. If you're at the gym or in a car, what are you listening to?
Normally my son's like playlists because I'm not cool enough to think of good music. But then if it's my own music, it's like 90s and then alternative and reggae.
90s on 9. What did your son listen to?
I don't know, a bunch of different things.
Like pop stuff?
Pops. No, like rap and French and
So you're just trying to keep up with him by listening to his playing. That's
I
cool.
try to be
Rap and
cool.
French. Interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Last question here. You wrote a book. It's going to a movie. Who would play you?
Who would play me? I'm thinking like
That's a new question.
That's a new
Awkwafina
question.
Would be
Awkwafina, fine.
from-
Yeah.
What about Catherine Zeta-Jones?
Whoa, she's not Asian, but I was thinking
Well,
of somebody Asian, but it doesn't matter.
That's right.
Or Lucy Liu.
The whole point is
Lucy
it
Liu.
doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know who would play me. We'd have to think about that.
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep that one.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, once again, we really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. And we always like to, and not always like to, we always do give to the charity of our guest choice. So do you have a charity that you want to give a shout out to?
Sure. Yeah, N Street Village.
N Street
It's
Village.
been around for 40 years. It helps women out of homelessness and addiction. And it's local on 14th and 14th Street and Logan Circle.
Perfect. Absolutely. Thanks
Awesome.
again.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Keyed In with your hosts, Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. For more information on selling your home, find us online at keyedinpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Keyed In on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Keyed In Podcast, at Rabin Max, and at Brent E. Jackson. And follow Max on TikTok at MaxwellRabin_properties.